Hey everyone, and welcome to the Deep Dive. Whether you're a seasoned crane operator, working towards recertification, just starting your journey in the field, or focused on keeping everyone safe as risk and safety personnel, this one's for you. Today's Deep Dive is brought to you by Safety One Source Spedit, those folks who are all about keeping things safe in the crane world. We're going to unpack some seriously important stuff from Volume 5 of your safety manual, zeroing in on crane operations around power lines.
When it comes to crane safety, this is about as high stakes as it gets.
Right. It's not just about ticking boxes and following the rules. This is about making sure everyone on site goes home safe. And this manual doesn't mince words and straight up says that crane operations near power lines can be extremely hazardous.
It's a point worth emphasizing. The manual actually recommends avoiding working near power lines altogether whenever humanly possible.
Which, makes sense, right? Why even dance with danger if you don't have to? But as anyone who's worked on a job site knows, the real world isn't always that neat and tidy. Sometimes those power lines are unavoidable. So that's where this manual becomes your best friend. It actually lays out this really detailed flowchart figure 53.4.5.51-1 for those following along, which helps you figure out the right safety procedures based on your exact situation.
It's all about assessing the situation. Are we talking de-energized lines? What's the voltage we're dealing with? These are the questions you need to answer right off the bat.
And this flowchart really breaks it down in a way that's easy to follow. You can't just blindly follow the rules. You have to understand which rules apply to your situation. Speaking of specific situations, the manual then dives into this concept of specified clearance. Think of it as an invisible buffer zone around those power lines. You absolutely cannot cross that line with any part of the crane, the load, or even the load line itself.
The illustrations in figures 53.4.5.12 and 53.4.5.113 really bring that point home. They show you how the crane's position and setup directly affect the size and shape of that clearance zone. It's not just about knowing the rules, it's about visualizing how those rules play out in three-dimensional space.
It's almost like a giant game of spatial awareness where the stakes are incredibly high. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Which brings us to the next crucial piece of the puzzle, figuring out the voltage of those power lines. The manual outlines two main approaches, the preferred method and, let's call it the backup plan.
And that preferred method is all about getting the most accurate information possible. Ideally, you reach out to the utility company and they'll tell you the exact voltage and elevation of those lines. No guesswork, no assumptions, just straight facts.
Okay, that makes sense. But let's say, for whatever reason, you can't get that info directly from the utility company. What then?
Then you turn to figure 53.5.5.14, which shows you different types of power line support structures. By comparing what you see on site to these illustrations, you can get a general idea of the voltage you're dealing with.
So it's like a visual guide to help you estimate.
Yeah.
But definitely not as reliable as going straight to the source.
Exactly. The manual is very clear that this is a last resort. And even when you estimate the voltage, there are minimum clearance distances you absolutely have to maintain, no matter what. We're talking 20 feet for lines up to 350 kV and 50 feet for anything higher.
Those are your hard limits.
Yeah.
The non-negotiables, no exceptions.
Right. Now, ideally, whenever possible, you want to eliminate the risk entirely. And that's where de-energizing those power lines comes in. Sections 53.4.5.2 and 53.4.5.3 lay out the steps involved in this process.
Let me guess. It's not as simple as just flipping a switch.
It's definitely not a DIY project. You need to follow a strict protocol, starting with de-energizing the line, then grounding it, and finally, having a qualified representative from the utility company come out and personally verify that it's safe to work near.
So it's all about layers of protection.
Right.
Removing that electrical hazard altogether.
Right. Because even when a line is de-energized, you still want to treat it with extreme caution. There's always the possibility of residual energy or something unexpected happening. But let's face it, de-energizing those lines isn't always feasible. So what happens when you have to work near energized power lines? That's where things get really interesting.
And a bit nerve-wracking.
You know it. That's why the manual goes into great detail about all the precautions you need to take in these situations. It all starts with understanding that power lines aren't static. They can move, wind, temperature changes. Even the load itself can cause those lines to sway or sag.
So it's not just a matter of staying a certain distance away. You have to factor in that potential movement.
Exactly. That's why the manual emphasizes consulting with the utility company to determine how much those lines could realistically move. You need that information to establish a truly safe clearance zone.
And then before you even think about lifting that first load, the manual stresses the importance of those on-site planning meetings.
It's all about getting everyone on the same page. The lift director, the operator, the signal person, the spotters, everyone involved needs to be crystal clear on the location of the power lines, the safe clearance zones, and the procedures they'll be following.
So it's like a pre-flight checklist for the entire operation,
Right.
making sure everyone understands the risks and their role in mitigating those risks.
Exactly. And those on-site meetings are also a great opportunity to discuss those additional safety measures the manual outlines for working near energized lines.
Okay. Like what kind of measures are we talking about?
Well, for starters, there's the use of non-conductive taglines and rigging. Remember, those power lines are essentially giant conductors of electricity. If your tagline or rigging happens to brush against one, you want to make sure it's made of a material that won't create a path for that electricity to flow.
So it's like an extra layer of insulation, just in case.
Exactly. Then you've got those elevated warning lines or barricades we talked about earlier. They need to be positioned at or beyond that specified clearance distance, creating a clear visual barrier between the crane and those power lines. It's like a giant do not cross tape for the crane.
A constant reminder of where that danger zone is.
Exactly. And to really drive that point home, the manual talks about assigning dedicated spotters to monitor those clearance distances. These spotters need to be equipped with visual aids, like rangefinders or marked off areas on the ground. And they need to be in constant communication with the operator.
They're like the operator's extra set of eyes, making sure nothing gets too close for comfort.
Right. And the manual even suggests using those automatic warning or range-limiting devices on the crane itself. These are technological safeguards that can alert the operator if they're getting too close to a power line, or even automatically stop the crane from moving any closer.
Wow. So we're talking about visual aids, human spotters, and even technology, all working together to prevent those close calls.
It's all about redundancy, creating multiple layers of protection. And of course, grounding the crane is another essential measure. This helps to redirect any stray electrical currents to the ground, reducing the risk of electrocution.
So many safeguards. It's clear that this manual is taking every possible precaution to ensure safety in these situations.
Absolutely. And it goes even further by outlining additional precautions for specific scenarios, like operating directly below energized power lines.
Okay. Why is that considered an even riskier situation?
Think about it. You've got this massive load suspended above you, and if anything goes wrong, those power lines are directly in the path of danger.
It's almost like a sword hanging overhead. Section 5, 3.4.5.7 of the manual outlines the steps you need to take in this specific scenario.
Right. First, you need to figure out the maximum reach of that crane. How far can that boom actually extend? And again, you need to consult with the utility company to factor in how much those lines could move due to wind or sag. Then you combine those two pieces of information. If there's any chance, even a slim one, that the crane could reach those power lines, you have to follow even stricter safety measures.
So it's all about anticipating that worst case scenario, planning for the unexpected. The manual actually lays those out in section 5.3.4.5.8.
Exactly. That section covers operating within the specified clearance of energized power lines, which, let's be honest, is the danger zone. The manual is very clear that this should only be done as a last resort when all other options have been exhausted, and it should always be approached with extreme caution.
Okay. So what kind of extra precautions are we talking about here?
Well, first and foremost, this type of operation requires approval and direct supervision by not just the lift director, but also a qualified representative from the utility company, or even an electrical engineer. So you've got two sets of expert eyes on the operation, making sure everything is done by the book.
It's like having a safety net and a backup safety net. What else?
Then you've got those dedicated spotters we talked about before. But their role is even more critical in this scenario. They're literally the last line of defense, constantly monitoring those minimum approach distances and making sure the crane doesn't get anywhere near those lines.
Their focus has to be laser sharp. Any distraction could have serious consequences.
Absolutely. And those elevated warning lines or barricades, they're still essential, providing that visual barrier between the crane and the power lines. And the manual is very specific about the type of rigging that can be used in this scenario. It has to be non-conductive. Just like in those other scenarios, you want to prevent the rigging from becoming a path for electricity if it were to come into contact with a power line.
Every detail matters when you're operating this close to a potential hazard. What about barricades?
The manual talks about using non-conductive barricades to create a restricted work area around the crane, keeping unauthorized personnel out of the danger zone. And just to emphasize the seriousness of the situation, it explicitly states that no one is allowed to touch the equipment, the load line, or the load unless the lift director gives the all clear. That includes the operator. It's all about minimizing risk at every single turn.
So it's like creating a safety bubble around the entire operation.
Exactly. And then there's grounding.
Yeah.
In this scenario, grounding the equipment is non-negotiable. You want to make sure any stray electrical currents are safely directed into the ground, significantly reducing the risk of electrocution. Now, the manual also mentions insulated barriers, but those are typically installed by the utility company. And they're more like a last line of defense, not something you'd rely on as a primary safety measure.
This whole section really highlights how working within that specified clearance zone is like walking a tightrope.
It's a high-stakes situation that requires meticulous planning, clear communication, and unwavering attention to detail. But all of these precautions, they're there for a reason, to protect the lives of everyone on that job site.
It's not just about following rules.
Yeah.
It's about understanding the why behind those rules. Because when you understand why something is important, you're more likely to follow it.
Right. And that brings us back to one of the most important points the manual makes, jock training.
It's not just about reading the manual and hoping for the best. Every single person involved in these operations, from the lift director to the spotters to the operators, needs to be properly trained and evaluated on their understanding of the electrical hazards, the safety procedures, and what to do in an emergency.
That's not a one-and-done deal either.
Not at all. Training needs to be ongoing, constantly reinforcing those safe practices and keeping everyone's skills sharp. Because the technology is always evolving, new equipment is being developed, and safety standards are always being updated. Staying ahead of the curve is crucial. We've talked about the importance of on-site planning meetings, but I'm curious, what role does communication play once the operation is actually underway?
Communication is the lifeline of any crane operation, especially when you're working near energized lines. It's not just about having the right equipment or knowing the rules. It's about creating that culture of safety where everyone is looking out for each other.
You mentioned spotters earlier.
Yeah.
But can you expand on their role in communication? It seems like they're a key link between the operator and the rest of the crew.
Absolutely. Spotters are the operator's eyes and ears on the ground. They need to be able to clearly and concisely communicate any potential hazards, clearance issues, or anything else that could compromise safety.
So they're not just passively observing. They're actively engaged in the operation, providing real-time feedback to the operator.
Exactly. And it's a two-way street. The operator needs to be able to trust those spotters implicitly and respond to their instructions without hesitation.
It's a partnership built on trust, clear communication, and a shared commitment to safety. Thinking back to all the different scenarios we've discussed, de-energized lines, energized lines, operating below those lines, communication really is the common thread that runs through them all.
It's the glue that holds that whole safety system together. Without effective communication, even the most comprehensive procedures can fall apart.
It's like a safety net with holes in it. Might look good on paper, but it's not going to do much good when you need it most.
Right. And that communication isn't just verbal. Remember those warning lines, barricades, and signs we talked about? Those are visual forms of communication, serving as constant reminders of those safety zones and helping everyone on site stay aware of the risks.
Like silent alarms.
Yeah.
Constantly reinforcing that message of caution. Okay. So we've established that communication is key. But what happens if, despite all these precautions, something does go wrong? What if the crane comes into contact with a power line?
That's where those emergency response protocols we mentioned earlier come into play.
And hopefully, everyone's been trained on those protocols and knows exactly what to do in those critical moments. What does the manual say about responding to contact with the power line?
The manual is very clear. If contact occurs, the operator should immediately try to break contact by moving the crane away from the power line. But, and this is crucial, they should only do so if it can be done safely.
Meaning, if they can move the crane without endangering themselves or anyone else in the process.
Exactly. If moving the crane isn't safe or even possible, the operator should stay in the cab and wait for qualified personnel to arrive and isolate that power source. In the meantime, everyone else on site needs to stay clear of the crane and the surrounding area. Absolutely no one should approach or touch the crane until the power has been shut off and the situation has been declared safe by those qualified personnel.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We're talking about a massive piece of equipment that's suddenly become a conductor of electricity. Touching it could be fatal.
And it's not just the crane itself. That electrical current can travel through the ground as well, energizing the area around the crane. That's why those barricades and warning lines are so crucial. They create a buffer zone to keep people away from that potential danger. It's a ripple effect. The danger extends beyond the immediate point of contact.
Okay, so the key takeaway here is, if contact occurs,
Yeah.
stay calm, stay clear, and let the professionals handle it.
Right. And speaking of professionals, let's talk about the role of the utility company in all of this. We've mentioned them a few times, but their involvement is absolutely critical. They're the experts on those power lines. They know the voltage, the clearance distances, the potential hazards, and most importantly, how to de-energize and ground those lines safely.
So it's not just about following the guidelines in this manual. It's about collaborating with the experts who know these power systems inside and out.
Exactly. Anytime you're planning a crane operation near power lines, the first step should always be to reach out to the utility company and get their input. They can provide valuable information, like those movement distances we talked about earlier, and they can help you develop a safe work plan that minimizes those risks.
And of course,
Yeah.
in those emergency situations we just discussed, they're the ones who will come out and isolate the power source, making it safe for everyone to approach the crane and assess the situation.
They're an essential part of the safety equation.
You know, going through this manual, it's really striking how much knowledge and expertise is involved in operating cranes safely around power lines. It's not just about pulling levers and lifting heavy objects. It's about understanding these complex electrical hazards, meticulously following those safety procedures, and making critical decisions in real time.
And that's why training is so vital. We've said it before. But it bears repeating. Everyone involved in these operations needs to be properly trained and evaluated on their understanding of the risks, the procedures, and the emergency response protocols. It's not a one-time thing either.
Yeah.
Training needs to be ongoing to keep everyone's skills sharp and up to date on the latest safety practices.
Because, as we all know, technology is always evolving, new equipment is being developed, and safety standards are constantly being updated. Staying ahead of the curve is essential for preventing accidents.
Right.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. We've talked about the risks of working near power lines, the importance of communication and visual aids, the role of the utility company, and the absolute necessity of proper training. We've delved into specific scenarios, like de-energizing lines, working near energized lines, and operating below those lines. And we've emphasized those critical safety measures for each situation. But, you know, after all this discussion, I keep coming back to one fundamental question. Why? Why is all of this so important? Why do we go to such lengths to ensure safety in these operations?
Because it's about people.
Exactly. It's about the lives of those operating the cranes, the workers on the ground, and the people in the surrounding community. It's about making sure everyone goes home safe at the end of the day.
It's about recognizing that no job, no project, no deadline is worth risking a human life.
And that's a message that bears repeating again and again and again.
Absolutely. Safety is paramount. It has to be the top priority. Always.
Well said. It's about recognizing that safety isn't just a set of rules or a checklist. It's a value. It's a commitment. It's about doing things the right way, even when it's inconvenient or time-consuming.
Absolutely. Every decision we make, every action we take on a job site has a potential ripple effect. And understanding those consequences, that's what drives a true safety culture.
It's about putting people's well-being ahead of deadlines and profits. It's about creating an environment where everyone, from the most experienced operator to the newest member of the crew, feels empowered to speak up about safety concerns.
And this manual, it really lays the groundwork for that kind of culture. It gives everyone a common understanding of the risks associated with crane operations near power lines and provides clear, practical guidance on how to mitigate those risks.
It's like a roadmap to safe crane operation. But as you said earlier, it's not enough to just have the roadmap. You have to study it, internalize it, and know how to apply it in the real world.
And that's where training comes in. We can't stress this enough. Ongoing training, where everyone has the opportunity to learn, practice, and refine their skills. That's essential.
It's about staying ahead of the curve, knowing the latest technologies, equipment, and safety standards. It's about fostering a culture where asking questions is encouraged and mistakes are seen as learning opportunities.
Because the goal isn't just to avoid accidents. It's to create a safety culture that's so ingrained, so second nature that accidents become almost impossible.
Now that's a powerful goal. It's about going beyond just checking the boxes and really embracing safety as a core value.
Exactly. And it's a responsibility we all share. It's not just on the lift director or the safety officer. It's on each and every person on that job site to be proactive and look out for one another.
If you see something that looks unsafe, you say something. If you're not sure about a procedure, you ask. No one should ever feel hesitant to prioritize safety, and no one should be penalized for doing so.
That's how you build a culture of trust and accountability. It's how you ensure that everyone goes home safe at the end of the day.
And at the end of the day, that's what really matters. All this talk about manuals, procedures, and equipment. It all comes down to protecting people.
You got it. This deep dive, it's been a reminder of just how dangerous these operations can be, but it's also been a source of hope, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. By understanding the risks, following these proven safety procedures, and working together to build that strong safety culture, we can prevent accidents and save lives.
Knowledge is power. And in this case, it's the power to make a real difference.
So to our listeners out there, whether you're a seasoned crane operator, working towards certification, just starting out in the field, or focused on safety, like the pros at Safety One Source Light, we hope this deep dive has equipped you with the knowledge to stay safe.
Remember, never stop learning, questioning, and prioritizing safety on every job site.
A huge thanks to Safety One Source for sponsoring this episode and for their commitment to safety in the crane industry. You folks are truly making a difference. And to all our listeners, thanks for joining us. Stay safe out there.
Until next time.